Hi guys, it's April, and it is now June, which means it's time for my May wrap up. Now this wrap up, while it covers the last 2 weeks of May, because I did a first half of the May wrap up, which I will link up above and down below, while it contains both the last 2 weeks of May, I also had Panelathon in there, which I read a whole bunch of graphic novels, comics, and manga for that. Once again, I will link that up above and down below in case you're interested in what I read then, but I also still read some traditional books as well. And that is what this is covering, but because of Panelathon and all of that, and it only being 2 weeks, I only have 4 reads to talk about for this wrap up. And with those 4 reads, it ends up bringing my total for the year up to 81 reads, which I think is pretty good. I am by far overseeding what I need to be reading at this point in time to reach my year goal. I've read 1,287 pages for this wrap up, bringing my monthly total to 4,659 pages and bringing my yearly total to 23,833 pages read so far. I am still averaging pretty steadily on the number of pages I read per day. Right now I'm sitting at about 158 pages read per day, bringing my average book reading to about 2 days per book. But I guess at this point I can get into what I have read for the last 2 weeks of May. The first book I want to talk about is Again But Better by Christine Riccio. Most of you guys probably know who she is. She goes as Poland Banana Books here on BookTube. I decided I wanted to read it because it looked like it would be something cute. It is the story about a young girl named Shane who decides that she wants to completely upset her world and try things a little differently so she can come out of the shell that she seems to have formed herself into while she is at college, and she decides to study abroad in London. While she is there, all kinds of things happen. She makes new friends, she meets boys, and it's more of a coming of age story for the college student. It is cute and adorable in all of its own ways, but I did notice that Christine has put a lot of herself in this book. At times, I feel like Shane was Christine because there was a lot of parallels going on, and I think if I didn't know Christine's persona here on BookTube, I wouldn't have seen that, and this book would have been adorable in its own right. You can definitely tell that it is her first book. It will be interesting to see what she does from this point on. Her writing style was very easy to read and I did enjoy it. I just feel like I got a story about an alternate version of Christine. The next book that I read was Firebird by Mercedes Lackey. This was Shay and my book club book pick of the month for the Tell It Again book club. This is a retelling of the Russian story of the Firebird. I was really super excited to get into the story because I've had a drive to read more Russian folklore, so I was super excited about this. However, I wasn't too excited about how this story ended up playing out. This follows Ilya, who's one of the sons of a Russian prince. His family life is not the best. He's not too keen on being part of his family, and then this Firebird comes in and totally upsets absolutely everything. The way this book portrays women, the way it talks about women, the way it fat shames, the way the main character pretty much just thinks about how he is going to be vetting more women, I got really uncomfortable with. I loved all of the Russian folklore woven throughout the story, but I could not get past the main character and how women were just treated in this time period and in this boy's thoughts and in this family. I have more in-depth thoughts over at Shay's channel where we talked about this book together. She had some of the same feelings as I did. It just was not what I expected out of Mercedes Lackey, and I think that's what surprised me the most because the writing is still very much Mercedes Lackey, but the story, no. The next book that I read is The Near Wish by V.E. Schwab. This is actually V.E. Schwab's first published work. It has been republished, so I was really excited to actually get a chance to read this book. It is the story of Lexi from the small town of Near when a stranger shows up and kids start disappearing. I really liked this story, at least the elements of witches and all of that magical creepiness that was played out throughout this story. Now, this isn't one of my favorite V.E. Schwab's work. You can definitely tell how she has evolved in her writing since she first wrote this story. This story is very simple compared to a lot of her other storylines and her characters and her world building and things like that. You can see her starting out in this work, and while it is more of a basic story and some insta-love that, okay, it's a thing that happened, I think my favorite part was probably reading the story at the end of the original story. And last but not least, I read The Darkwater Bride by Marty Ross. This is a eerie, creepy story about a young girl whose father dies one day in London through a strange series of events, and she decides that when she finds out, she's going to stay and try and help figure out what happened because she doesn't think her father committed suicide like everyone's trying to push. This is a very atmospheric kind of story, especially in the way that it is told. It leans on the side of creepy. Now, this was an audiobook from Audible. The only problem I had at times was because it was written for a audio narration, there were times where things got confusing and you didn't know what was going on because all you got was sound effects. You didn't get that descriptive thing, and I think that was trying to build the suspense, but I think sometimes it just lost the suspense. And then the story was very dark in both a human and atmospheric sense. It went down a path that some people would probably feel very uncomfortable with. It deals a lot with abuse and rape and the underseedier world of all of that. I was expecting it to be more of a ghost story, and it did have some of those elements and some of those storylines, but it also delved more into the very gross way that women were treated back in the 1800s. And since we were in that time period, we had a main character who felt too far out of her time zone because she got very annoying at times with the way she was pushing to be involved in things. From a modern day woman perspective, it made sense, but part of me thinks that because of when it was set, it wouldn't necessarily have been her being that pushy. It was an interesting story. It was very dark and moody and gross and eerie and blah and things, and yes. Those are my thoughts. So that was the last 4 weeks of May for me. Tell me down below what you are planning to read this summer, because it is time to sit and relax by the pool, on the beach, at the lake, outside, where I'm not going to be because outside tries to kill me. Just tell me down below what you plan on reading, and I heart your beautiful faces. Bye.